Welcome! In this video, we'll dive deep into the comprehension passage, helping you not only to understand the context but also to visualize what's happening. Read along with me to understand and comprehend the passage thoroughly, including the meanings of difficult terms, and this is the very essence of mastering comprehension.
Mo and Marwood have finally found Nameless. They had been looking for this large redwood tree that no one had ever attempted to climb before. Redwood trees can live for more than 2,000 years and are the world's tallest living trees. Mo and Marwood stood at the base of Nameless, peering upwards into its crown. The structure of any redwood tree is the opposite of most trees, whose branches get smaller towards the top. Nameless, this ancient giant of the forest, grew increasingly complicated and more massive higher off the ground. The tree was about 100 meters tall, with a diameter of about 3 meters near its base. The trunk was an enormous cylinder of soft crumbly bark. Far above the ground, a few small wispy branches popped out of the trunk, but there were no branches on its lower reaches. Higher up still, a tangle of limbs emerged and wandered out of sight, buried in clouds of foliage. Mo and Marwood couldn't see its top. Marwood recalled that in ideal conditions, a redwood can grow from a seed into a tree that's an astonishing 16 meters tall in just its first 20 years of life, increasing in height by nearly a meter annually. After that, it grows faster still. Adding mass at an accelerating rate, it can exceed 75 centimeters in diameter at chest height in fewer than 60 years. The growth of redwoods generally slows down after the first 100 years, though by the age of 800, they may have reached a height as tall as a 30-story building. Redwoods are shade-tolerant. They can survive in dark places at the bottom of a forest, in the deep shade of their elders, where few other trees would survive. A small redwood living in deep shade hardly grows at all, but doesn't die. It goes into a kind of suspended animation. If it is hit by light, it once again grows with relentless speed. Nameless had clearly basked in light. "You aren't going to try to climb it, are you?" asked Marwood incredulously. No answer. Mo looked again at the lowest branch of a smaller tree standing next to Nameless. Without warning, he leapt, grabbed, and swung himself up onto the branch in one fluid movement and began climbing upwards. "I really don't think that's very smart," Marwood warned from below. 10 minutes later, Mo arrived at the top of the smaller tree. The tree had narrowed to a pole thinner than his wrist, and began swaying under his weight. Having got as high as he could go, Mo looked across at Nameless and spotted a spray of slender branches on the curving wall of its monstrous trunk. A little branch stuck out, directly in front of him. Mo wanted to grab that branch. He edged closer to it, and the smaller tree began to bend under his weight. There was a gap between the branch of the smaller tree and Nameless. From the ground, Mo hadn't noticed that gap, expecting that the little tree's branches touched the big tree's branches, providing a bridge to walk across. Mo studied the situation. If he could just reach out far enough, he might be able to grab that little branch on Nameless. Trying not to think about how high up he was, Mo focused his mind on the problem. The gap was really not very large, he thought. He would have to let go of the small redwood and make a leap up into the big tree, and grasp a branch with his hands, like a circus performer catching the bar of a swinging trapeze. He had to jump high, or his body wouldn't clear the branches of the smaller tree and he'd get tangled. "If I was standing on the ground and I had to make this jump, I could do it," he thought. "So why not up here?" He tried to force his hand to just let go of the tree. "Just let go." "I can't watch," Marwood shouted furiously from below and closed his eyes. He dreaded hearing a scream followed by a meaty thud. In the top of the tree, Mo let go and jumped. He felt gravity go to zero. The world stopped. Mo watched the branch of the large redwood approach in slow motion and saw his fingers extend towards it. There was a jerk and he found himself hanging from the branch by both hands, bouncing with his feet kicking the air. Swinging hand over hand, he got himself over to the trunk and climbed the next 3 precarious meters onto a stronger branch. He had arrived somewhere in the lower tiers of Nameless, just below the crown of the huge tree. The branches here were bigger and closer together. There was foliage everywhere, above, below, and on all sides, layer upon layer of leaves, like tents within tents. The tree hadn't looked so big from the ground. Climbing upward slowly and steadily through the labyrinth, Emo lost sight of the ground. It felt as if he was passing through a membrane and entering another world. His senses were overwhelmed by an impression of life all around. Flaky, gray-green, and brownish plants, in all manner of shapes, hung from branches, drippy, frizzy, stringy, and hairy. He began picking pieces off, tucking them into his pocket. As he neared the upper surface of the redwood canopy, the lacework of branches glowed with varied shades of green and he broke out into the sunlight. An hour after he'd jumped into it, Emo arrived at the top of Nameless. "It's doable,"